As another patch for Deadlock drops, the developers look to continue development at a fast pace. This patch sees a raft of big changes, including a complete overhaul of the matchmaking system, 3 new items, and massive changes targeted towards making the game less snowbally. So let's dive in and take a look at the most significant gameplay changes for this patch. I'm Drongo, this is your Deadlock, let's get to it. Now before we get into the meat and potatoes of this new patch, let's take a quick look at these new items. There are 3 new items in total. The first item, called Spellslinger Headshots, is a weapon item costing 3,000 souls that upgrades from Soul Shredder bullets. The second item, called Arcane Surge, is another 3,000 soul upgrade item, however, it upgrades from Kinetic Dash. The third item is Spirit Snatch. It's a 3,000 soul spirit item that upgrades from Spirit Strike. We'll go into much greater depth regarding these items later on in the video. Now, let's get to the major gameplay changes for this patch. First up, matchmaking has been completely overhauled. They've now combined both ranked and standard play into a single queue with no limited hours. This change will hopefully mean a much larger pool of players to match with each other rather than splitting them over 2 queues, and that should mean better quality games for everybody. Keep in mind that Deadlock was already tracking your MMR in these standard games that you were playing, it just wasn't showing it to you. I can appreciate that some people might feel stressed knowing that every game of Deadlock they play is going to count towards something now. And the developers realize this too. They've put together a couple of options to reduce how much information you actually know about your MMR, which is a great solution to the anxiety many of us feel when queuing up for a ranked game. But speaking of MMR, you'll now have MMR depending on which hero you play. If the game knows that every time you pick Haze, you stomp the lobby, then all of a sudden you want to try out Abrams, but you start feeding like crazy every game, it will adjust your MMR for Abrams to represent your slow adaptation to the punching lifestyle. There are now also leaderboards in the game that will show you who the best players in each region are on each specific hero, though it doesn't seem to be 100% accurate at the moment, and there's actually no functionality with these names yet, so hopefully in the future the devs look to add a way to see profiles of players on the leaderboard and then view the games directly. For players wanting to improve, a change like that would really add a lot of quality of life to Deadlock. With the overhaul to the matchmaking system, you can of course queue as a party, which means playing with friends is back on the menu. However, if you're Ascendant 1 or above, which is about only 2.7% of the player base, you'll only be able to queue up with 2 friends. Everyone else can team up with as many people as they like. Now, not everybody likes to solo against a whole stack of people, and if you prefer to play solo and only play against other solo players, then there's actually a setting that you can turn on and enable if you press F7 on your keyboard, and then just type in mm_prefer_solo_only space. It'll be set to false by default and just change it to true, and then that should fix you up. They've also included a feature which allows you to request a lane swap. It's available in the rooftop and zipline stage of the game, so only right at the beginning. You can initiate that lane swap request by clicking this little button below the portrait on the scoreboard. Keep in mind though that your teammate can say no if they don't like the matchup that you're offering them. While these weren't all the changes that were made to matchmaking, these were definitely the ones we felt were most impactful. We'll move on to our next topic now, which is the changes to the T2 walkers, but if you want to read the full changes to the matchmaking, the link to the entire patch notes is down in the description. So with 5 changes to the T2 walkers, the developers finally got fed up with people talking shit about the walkers. Overall, there are massive changes to the walkers in this patch, which should see game times extend out quite a bit longer due to the walkers' newfound strength. First up, T2 walkers now have resistance based on how many enemies are nearby. If there's only 1 enemy, then that's 0% resistance. However, if there are 6 enemies all pushing a walker together, 40% resistance. Not only that, but the inner walkers now have a significantly higher health pool, going from 5,800 to 8,000 health. The next big change is that T2 walkers will now also provide 25% bullet and spirit resist to nearby allies. This is a massive buff, and it means that if you're getting dived under walker, you're going to be a lot harder to kill now. Further, this change will make it much harder for a team to deathball down a lane and fight against an enemy deathball who has walker assistance, because not only does it provide those resists, it now also deals more damage with its laser, an additional 2% max health damage per second, together with the stomp, which also got buffed to also deal an extra 10% max health as damage. Walkers are going to represent a massive threat in Deadlock now, and this is a big change that is hopefully going to help reduce how fast these games of Deadlock can snowball. Now, we just mentioned death balls, and the developers have realized that it might be a bit of a problem, so they've gone ahead and reduced the soul bounty for hero kills slightly, keeping it at the same in the early game but reducing the scaling in the mid to late game, going from a 2,000 soul cap at 45 minutes to a 1,600 soul cap at 45 minutes. This is another change to help reduce the speed of the snowball, and I appreciate that there are a lot of balls that we're talking about right now, but with the death ball meta of the last patch resulting in so many kills, soul leads would begin to build quickly, and naturally this meant with more death ball came more snowball. But this wasn't the only change that was made to souls in this patch. Soul sharing also got quite a significant nerf, with changes I'm sure will be overlooked by many. Previously, when 3 players shared souls in a lane, they each got 45% of the original bounty, for a total of 135%. With this patch, that changes to 35% each, which means only 105% of the original soul bounty is generated. This is quite a curious change, as it means that having 2 players in the lane together generates 120% of the original soul bounty, but more than that, severely hampers soul generation. Before, it was a very slow tapering off with more people, but now it is not subtle at all. This is a really interesting change, and it means now that it is always optimal to have 2 people in a lane collecting souls together. How does the old saying go? 2 is company, 3's a crowd. This will be my laning mantra, at least for this patch. Another big change to be aware of is that once you've taken down the 2 shrines and you kill the first patron floating in the air, killing that patron will now reduce the death timers on the enemy team by 20 seconds. It's important to note that this won't actually reduce the death timers below 10 seconds. And this is a really smart change, because not only does it give more of an opportunity for a comeback, it gives everyone an opportunity to sync up on their death timers, and it means that deaths and lives won't stagger. This is another big factor in stopping that snowball. And speaking of stopping the snowball, bridge buffs have been changed significantly. Instead of walking over them, you'll need to treat them like the Rejuvenator and melee them to secure them. Further, as the game goes on longer, the bridge buffs will now scale with the game length. As an example, the gun buff, which previously gave 20% fire rate and 40% ammo, now gives 10% fire rate and 30% ammo at the 10-minute mark. But it grows in strength until it reaches 30% fire rate and 60% ammo at the 40-minute mark. This is another change that is going to help reduce the snowball. The buffs will be less impactful early on, and it means that teams that are behind and don't have map control won't be punished as harshly for missing out on these buffs. On top of that, the Urn has received a big nerf in this patch, with the initial bounty of the Urn being reduced by more than 1,000 souls. Started at 4,050 souls, it's now on 3,000 souls flat. The scaling of the Urn remains the same, but once again, the team that is ahead with map control is going to be getting less ahead than what they were in the previous patch. There is a theme here, and slowing the snowball is definitely that theme. Now, they did also increase the time that it takes until the Urn holder is revealed on the minimap by 5 seconds, from 20 seconds to 25 seconds, which does now mean that the enemy team has to wait 5 seconds longer before seeing that you only took the Urn to bait them to that side of the map, and now you're able to take the Outer Walker on the opposite side of the map more easily because you got more time. You know, it's a small change, but it makes a difference. So let's now move on to the map changes. There have been a number of map changes that we'll go over quickly. Firstly, the outer teleporters have moved from up top near the tier 3 jungle camps to underneath. They also moved the neutrals on the roof here a little bit closer to the T1 Guardian. Down here, they added a truck so you can more easily get up into this little crawl space. They made the close corridors between the outer and inner lanes a lot further from the main base. They made this entrance to the warehouse a lot more open. And then finally, they opened up the inside of the radio station due to the high number of broken angles being reported in this area. So that wraps up all the big gameplay changes. Let's take a more in-depth look at these new items though. So first up, Spellslinger Headshots. The main reason you'd be building this item is because of the passive it provides. It gives a 3% buff to your spirit power for every headshot you land, with up to a max of 12 stacks. That's up to 36% more spirit power. It's important to note that because it scales off spirit power, this item, despite only being a 3,000 soul upgrade, will most likely come after your big spirit items have already started coming online. Items like Boundless Spirit, Spiritual Overflow, or Diviner's Kevlar, as the benefit you'll be getting will only start to scale once your spirit power has already scaled. Heroes that I suspect will look to take advantage of this item include Seven, Lady Geist, and Pocket. Overall, this seems like an item you'll see picked up towards the end of the game. Next up, Arcane Surge. This is another upgrade item that will upgrade directly from Kinetic Dash. However, it's a 3000 soul spirit item. This marks the second cross-category item that we've seen added to Deadlock. This item enhances Kinetic Dash, and it gives a bonus to the next spell that you use after Kinetic Dash, granting you bonus range, duration, and spirit power for that spell. This item is definitely going to take some time testing to determine who and what spell works best with it, but already I can see some great use cases for a lot of the roster. Heroes like Warden with his ultimate will get great value here, as extra duration, range, and spirit power to scale the damage will do amazingly for him. Further, heroes like Seven will see great returns on their Power Surge ability, with a longer uptime helping keep that lightning always firing with no cooldown. Finally, Wraith's ultimate will look to extend the range of her lockdown as well as the duration. Overall, this item looks quite nice on a number of heroes, and I expect you'll see it picked up quite often. And finally, our third item, Spirit Snatch. Again, it's another upgrade item, this time coming from Spirit Strike and landing at a 3000 soul spirit item. What's unique about this item is that not only does it remove the spirit resist from your opponents, it steals that resist and it gives it to the user, making it a guaranteed pickup for heroes like Abrams and Viscous. For Abrams, the use case is obvious. He loves to get in deep on the backline, and that often means taking a lot of spirit damage, so being able to strengthen yourself is a huge plus. For Viscous, he can proc the snatch at range with his Puddle Punch. But not only that, he can proc it on multiple people at the same time if they're hit with the same Puddle Punch. Combined with the cooldown for Snatch only being 6 seconds and the duration of the buff lasting for 16 seconds, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Rapid Recharge, Spirit Snatch Viscous taking over Deadlock. In addition to the new items, there have been a raft of changes to the old items. We won't go over all of them, but some of the ones that we found interesting were the following. Silencer got reworked. Instead of it being an active that you pop to silence enemies, it now passively builds up on enemies like Toxic Bullets does. It silences for 2 seconds and then reduces the outgoing spirit damage by 40% for 4 seconds. There's also a timeout period of 12 seconds where you can't proc it on the same enemy again. This is an interesting change, as it doesn't have that immediate impact that the old silencer had, but I think that for heroes that itemize towards Ricochet, this could become a powerful tool in their arsenal. Silencer also no longer builds from slowing bullets, and that item now instead builds into Glass Cannon. Next up, Return Fire, which now requires extra regen as a prerequisite item. This is a small change, but it's one that will be felt across many lanes. Should hopefully look to keep quite a few more people out of the Insane Asylum. We've also got a big change for Metal Skin, which now reduces your movement speed by 1.5 whenever you use the active. This item has seen consistent nerfs in recent patches, and this is the first time we've ever seen an item actively reduce your movement speed. Though I guess technically, Ethereal Shift reduces your movement speed to 0, but I think technically it just reduces your entire hero to 0, so I don't know if that counts, but either way, a curious direction in attempting to balance a problematic item. We'll see how it pans out. Emoscav now grants +2 sprint speed when you have max stacks. I love the design of Emoscav, and think that this is another great addition to the item. At max stacks, this item delivers a huge amount of versatility, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing it picked up more regularly. And finally, for the items, Silence Glyph gets a massive nerf, with it no longer using a tracking projectile towards a unit target. Instead, it releases an aim-based projectile that silences upon impact. This is a huge nerf, and it will undoubtedly see heroes like Wraith reconsider whether they should be investing 3000 souls into a silencing item. While the cooldown for this item was reduced in this patch, the lack of guarantee when casting this on an enemy target will undoubtedly be difficult to justify. Now finally, we move on to the hero changes. There have been a huge amount of changes, and of course we won't go over all of them, but we'll do our best to pick out the most impactful changes. First up, Haze is receiving some love with a huge change to her Smoke Bomb. They've changed up the skill points and now given her Smoke Bomb a half-second phase out of the world when she casts it, which means that if your timing is right, no more Wraith ults, no more 7 stuns, no more Infernus ultis, and the best part is they gave it charges, which means that you can buy Rapid Recharge and you can start phasing out all forms of CC with only 4 seconds between each charge. It's absolutely mental. They also changed her ultimate to give spirit damage instead of extra bullet damage, which means that she is less reliant on bullet damage and less susceptible to bullet resistance. Next up, Grey Talon. A small little detail here, but Immobilizing Trap now tethers the target rather than rooting them, This is a great change for those who are trapped by Talon, and means that the likelihood of a charged shot hitting you has been reduced from 100% to 99%. I know it's not much, but there's still a chance that you'll dodge it, right? Anyway, Beginner's mini turrets also got a slight rework, with the biggest change being that your turrets will always live for at least 3 seconds. Turrets will now take at most 33% of their max health per second from any damage sources. If they take a big burst of damage, that damage will carry over into the next second. It's a nice little change that makes turrets have a higher guaranteed value, but the other changes, which we won't touch on here, mean that it will most likely be an easier time for your enemies once the mini turret numbers start climbing in the late game. Another small change here, but Viscous Puddle Punch can now be parried. You'll need to train yourself to parry when you hear that melee sound and that damn goo sound as well. When you parry the Puddle Punch, it denies the knockback and the damage, but fortunately for Viscous, it doesn't actually stun him. And finally, Yamato's ultimate has been reworked again. Well, not reworked, it's a slight change, but it's still a big one. It no longer provides a heal on cast. Instead, it provides a heal for each hero kill you get. Yamato has definitely become a big teamfight reset hero, but at least with Refresher, she won't be getting that double guaranteed heal anymore. Well folks, those are the most significant changes we could see in the patch notes. Overall, another great patch by the developers. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way to the end, we'd love you to leave a like down below. If we missed anything, make sure you leave a comment and let us know. And if you're looking forward to more Deadlock content, don't forget to subscribe. I've been Drongo, this is your Deadlock. Thank you for watching.